Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan Ziegler, and I'm our Senior Director of Modern Infrastructure at D&H, and we're super excited to have you here today. We're going to be talking all about harnessing the power of HPE Servers with Azure Local. We have two experts on the line today. The first is Alan Kerr with Microsoft, and he's the Director of the Adaptive Cloud for the Americas. And then we have Dominic Santo from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, who is the Compute Partner Account Manager. So we are really excited. Please put your questions in the chat box, and we will have time for a live Q&A at the end. But please feel free to ask questions as we go along. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Alan.
Thank you very much. All right, so today we're going to be talking about sort of Azure Local overview and just a couple of strategies that that we're seeing people use out there. But it's mainly about what it is and sort of what the direction Microsoft's going, with Azure Local and with our sort of platforms as a general rule. And the good thing about these kind of webinars is you can sort of be part of that and see where we're going, and that helps you inform decisions when you're talking to customers about what you want to do with them. And so the thing that, we have to have the obligatory marketing slides in there. And it really comes down to, if you look at sort of where we are in Gartner and Forrester and all the other ones, all the analysts really put us in sort of the top right in multiple categories. But the ones that kind of relate to this conversation are sort of this, the desktop, area where we're sort of the in VDI, if anyone's doing any of that. We're seeing a lot of replacement of Citrix and Horizon, and sort of what we're doing is really kind of called out by sort of Gartner as we're well ahead of everyone else. And also on the infrastructure piece, on-prem. Interestingly enough, this is actually based on our previous Azure Stack HCI generation and not on Azure Local. We anticipate when the new Gartner quadrants come out, it'll look much more like the one on the right there, is what we anticipate seeing. So Microsoft Adaptive Cloud, if we look at the cloud in general and how we kind of talk about it, I like to make my life simple. And so the thing for me is that I just define the edge as everything outside the public cloud. So if you're talking to me, public cloud would be Azure, right? And then you've got sort of this private cloud idea, which is everything else, which is your data centers, your colos, your server rooms, anything on the edge side, so your remote offices, and anything that plugs into sort of the real world, any of the industrial IoT type stuff. So if you have a manufacturer or something like that, any of their machines would be sort of an IoT industrial edge. And so when we're talking about that, I just define that as edge, fire edge, and operational edge, right? So I've got sort of the cloud, and then I've got the edge. And what we do at Microsoft is we take sort of the same operating system and we run our same virtual machines in Azure as we do anywhere on the edge, anywhere outside of that. Same containers and same Azure services. And so, if you start thinking about Azure as a platform and tool set and not a location, that's a better way of thinking about it, because I can really just drop Azure wherever we need it. And to us, that's what we call the adaptive cloud, and that's what HPE would call the hybrid cloud. Right? So you can kind of use those two interchangeably. There's actually more to the adaptive cloud, if we want to get sort of super technical on it. But just for the sake of simplicity, you can use those interchangeably. But it's really a matter of having this sort of one uniform, ability to do Azure anywhere. So if you looked at Azure Native, if you were to get out a map and you were to sort of spread it out and then get like a red marker and put dots where all the Microsoft data centers are, that's where this stuff lives here. So that's where the public cloud lives. That's where our sovereign clouds live. So that's, US Gov, US Secret, UK Gov, Canada Gov, those kind of things, as well as our industrial clouds. So manufacturing and finance and retail and similar, industry vertical specific clouds. But then on that map, if you looked around those red dots, right, there's a lot of space, whether it's in the United States or across the planet, whereby there isn't Microsoft data sets. And that's where Azure Local comes in. Right? So Azure Local, using a projection service called Azure Arc, gives us the ability to drop Azure wherever you need it, which gives us the same compute fabric. So it's the same virtual machines, the same management, same security, same orchestration identity. And that's across the global infrastructure piece, right? So in Azure natively, as well as anywhere else that the customer has stuff. The enterprise core, that's your data centers and co-locations, your intelligent edge, remote offices, and once again, the operational edge, and that's anything plugging into kind of the real world. So we started on this thing called Azure Local. It's been a journey. It was announced at the most recent Ignite, which was last November, but we started at the November before, the Ignite before we actually started on this journey, where we elevated what was called Azure Stack HCI to a first-party Azure service. When we elevated it to a first-party service, that's when we sort of developed additional sort of capabilities and made that Azure Local. Now, the important thing to note is anything that's running outside of that Azure is running on HPE, in this particular case, HPE hardware, right? So, none of this is sort of getting away from anything on-prem. In fact, you would actually have, there's actually durable use cases where you'd never want this stuff to leave. So, for example, if I'm in a hospital, I don't want that stuff in the cloud. I want that on-prem, right? If I'm running utilities, right? So if I'm running power utilities and water utilities and those kind of things, I would want that infrastructure on-prem. So Azure Local is basically a bare metal OS that is running on hardware wherever the customer needs it. And so when we look at it, it's out of the box cloud operations, right? So the moment you install sort of the operating system, or you deploy it from the cloud onto that local hardware, you are then able to manage the stuff all from the cloud, right? And so that's, you got the single pane of glass. It's designed to run virtual machines and containers, containerized apps as fast and securely as possible. And you can right-size the hardware, right? So if you look at the HPE catalog, it's a broad catalog with all kinds of things. So I've got DL380 type hardware, and I've got all the way down to the microserver type stuff. And so you can right-size the need for what the customer wants. And lastly, it's a zero trust model. So what we used to do is we used to ship a lot of all our OSs with tons and tons of security in it, yet people don't turn it on. So what we did was we turned everything on by default. So it's a secure by default OS. Azure Local is not just a renaming of Azure Stack HCI, which I've heard people tell me. What it actually is a collapsing of our Azure Stack Edge portfolio, which is the Microsoft Direct stuff for subscription, our Azure Operator Nexus platform, our Azure Stack Hub platform, and our Azure Stack HCI platform into a single platform. So Azure Local is a combination of all of those features and functions in one thing. Now, it is the same, it runs a common code base between Azure, so it's the same virtualization platform for VMs, same container platform, same storage platform, same networking platform. It is literally just the Azure code running on local hardware on-prem. When we talk about this, once again, the HCI was not, Azure Local is not just a renaming of Azure Stack HCI. It's actually, all of those different platforms into one. What it did become is a subset of our connected servers version. But what we're also doing is we're having these ultra low spec versions that we're coming out with. So you can have like single CPU, a few cores, single disk, those kind of things. Think about anywhere where someone says, I have a PC out there doing that on the back of a digital billboard or in a kiosk or something like that. That's where that would go. So you can maintain sort of the Azure security and stuff. And then we've got our disconnected operations, and that's anyone who needs to be offline permanently. So once again, I'll give you the example of our utilities that we run around the nation. Would be a good example, power utilities, water utilities. Defense is another good example whereby, for example, I've got a customer that's a government department. The department has a lot of boats that go underwater. They don't come up for months at a time. They use our disconnected operations version of this. And so it's not just a replacement of Azure Stack HCI. It is a sort of that's a subsection of it. And it's really all of those capabilities rolled into one. As kind of mentioned previously, it does have the same code base. So Azure itself, our Azure core code is the same code base that's in Azure Local. That's also the same as in Windows Server 2025. So the difference really being that Azure Local is an Azure service that gives you all the Azure capabilities. So for example, if I have old versions of Windows, I can put them in there and get security updates for free. I can get hot patching for free. And then we have our periodized version that's not evergreen, right? So Azure Local is evergreen, it's always up to date. Windows Server is a periodic release every 3 or so years. But the common code base is the same. So it's the same code base that we're running in Azure. So same virtualization platform, container storage and networking runs under all of these. So as we make improvements in Azure, well, you get those or you inherit those improvements out, at the edge, wherever you are. Deploying the platform is relatively simple. You basically go get your, your certified hardware. There is a catalog out there that you can go and look at, and you can see all the good stuff that HPE is doing in that. From there, you provision the software. You can provision it either locally or you can do it from the cloud. On top of that, you can then run your, any data and apps and AI and anything else you want to run on that. And you manage it all from the cloud. So you manage it all from that single pane of glass, that web page, so I can push, Microsoft Defender, I can do policy, I can do monitor, whatever I want. Copilot's another good one for infrastructure that I can now do across that whole stack. So AVD is another big one. So for anyone doing AVD, we get, I couldn't tell you how many requests for people wanting to get off of Citrix and getting off of Horizon. And most of those people are sort of moving to AVD. It is a cloud-based control plane with local resources. So you set all of the load balancers and resource locators and everything else up in the cloud, right? And then on-prem, you have your local work pool, right? And the local work pool is sitting next to your application. So what happens is if you have some clients, right? So I have some, Windows desktops, for example, or Mac desktops or whatever I'm doing. Basically what happens is RDP short path links these two, right? And so the data never leaves the site, it stays on site, and it just talks back and forth across the shortest path. So the cloud piece is really only for the load balancing and resource discovery piece. The rest is, all happens on-prem, right? So that's both the cluster with the work pool and your clients wherever they are. Now, obviously, the clients could also be remote and get to that. It's really a matter of making sure that this session pool is next to wherever your workload is. A lot of people come to us and say they want to get off VMware, so we're happy to help them with that. The first thing we look at is what's the, does this workload need to go to the cloud? If yes, and you've had a fight with VMware, then the fastest path is VMware solution, because that's us running VMware in the cloud. If you haven't had a fight with VMware, but you still want to get off and move it to the cloud, that goes this way, and you get sort of an Azure native thing. This particular, like I said, this is probably about 5%, to be honest, because most people, the reason it's on-prem is it's on-prem for a reason, and that's why they want to do it, the conversion on-prem. And that's where we come up with our on-prem model. So the first one is Azure Local, which is the most common preferred option. That's because I get my security updates and I get my, hot patching and all those kind of things. If I have to reuse existing hardware, for example, then I would have to go with Windows Server 2025. The preference is for everything to go towards Azure Local. That's sort of directionally where Microsoft's going. And it also gives you benefits that the other platforms don't get. Like I said, extended security updates, hot patching, any of those other things, as well as AVD. You can only run AVD on Azure Local because it is an Azure service. The way it works is when something boots up, it boots up and says, what's called a boot attestation. And it says, yes, I'm running in Azure, and then lets you kind of go forward from there. We do have a easy button migrator. So basically there's a Azure Migrate is the first party tool that's free that we give you the ability to migrate from your vSphere over to Azure Local. The key here between doing this migration with this and with another platform out there would be that when it does the migration, it hydrates everything up into Azure for you. So once you do the migrate, you can simply just log into the web page and see all your assets there. So you can see all your virtual machines and everything else you've got in there as part of that. If you use another third party to migrate it, you can, and you can get your information from, the VMware stack to the Azure Local stack, but it won't show up in the cloud. You would then have to hydrate that into Azure, right? Because it wouldn't know where it is. So you got to turn that on essentially, which kind of leads me to sort of the next point is that for all your customers, everything you should be doing, you should be turning on Azure Arc so you can manage all of it out of the gate. Now, Azure Arc itself doesn't cost you anything. And for those people that say, well, we don't have an Azure account, if you have an Office 365 account, you have an Azure account. If you go to portal.azure.com, those people will be able to log in. And so it's just a matter of turning on Arc and then managing the stuff in there. Management's always free. It's only when you start consuming services within Azure that it then costs. But if we look at Arc, if you're an MSP or you're managing customer stuff for you, Arc will make your life a lot easier because you basically got a single control plane. So what it means is I can take sort of, infrastructure from anywhere, edge data center, multi-cloud, and I can poke it up into Azure, right? Which means I can manage it all from there. Plus, I can then take Azure services and push them down. And that means I can push down, like if I wanted to deploy VMs that way, I could. If I wanted to deploy a SQL managed instance, whereby Microsoft's managing the security of your SQL, Microsoft's managing the updates, and then all you get is a single connection string like you would in the cloud, you can do that on-prem. We have customers doing that. Customers really like that, whereby Microsoft's managing all the security. We released, for example, SQL 2025 at Ignite last year in November. If you had a SQL managed instance, right, you were already running that code since April, right? So this gives you the ability to get all of your services to an evergreen and get the customer into an evergreen model, so you don't have to go around discussing upgrades. Same with operating systems, right? I can go from 2022 to 2025 using Windows Update. And so, getting customers out of getting stuck in sort of these old OSs is quite important, particularly for security. Once again, Azure Arc does all kinds of things. It does your update and patching for you. It does your, you can onboard things. It controls your access management, so you can now do remote access without opening up IDP onto all these things. You can just do it via the portal. Networking capabilities, compliance, security, all the different things that you would want to do, as well as turn on some disaster recovery stuff. The Copilot integration is interesting because you can then ask questions of the environment and see what's going on. And so Arc is sort of the underlying plumbing that gives you this capability. This is a bit of an eye chart, and I normally avoid these, but what I really want to point out is if you have Arc and you have software assurance, you essentially get all of these things included, right? And so you get update manager, which is huge. You get change tracking, so I can see what someone did to things. You get role-based access control, so I don't have to give everyone admin accounts. You name it, there's all kinds of stuff that comes with this, and this means it's managing the workload on top of the Azure Local platform. Plus, you get down here, being an Azure platform, I can get, if it's on Azure Local, I no longer have to pay for my extended security updates, and I no longer have to pay for my hot patching because they're included as Azure benefits. So those things move up the stack. And so this is a big, like I said, huge benefit for customers around the management capability. And finally, well, typically, how much does this cost, right? So if you've got you can either do pay as you go, or if you have software assurance, then it's $0 for most customers, right? So depending on the size of the customer, what they're doing, most customers have access to this today and don't have to pay for any of it. Or you can go and pay as you go, or you can do software assurance, right? So if you just have the license only, you can do this stuff here for free, right? But if you have the software assurance, then you can start doing this stuff over here, which is your patching and your updates and those kind of things. Pretty powerful stuff when you kind of get when you get under the covers. And once again, from a business perspective, it's really a matter of how do I maximize, sort of customer uptime? How do I maximize the resources within my organization in helping those customers? How do we, put as much sort of from a margin profile perspective, as much into those services as possible? All of these things give you those capabilities. Let's talk about licensing. So it's a fun topic. 3 ways to pay for this, right? The first one is $10 per core per month. I typically don't see this, or I typically only see this in very small edge case scenarios, a single core, single CPU, couple of cores, things like that. And because you don't get guest licensing with it. So you typically only have a single VM or 2 out there as well. So if I see those small edge locations, this is typically the optimum way of providing that licensing. So if I had an example of 100 cores, that would be $1,000 a month, because it's 100 times 10, assuming no discounts, monthly. And then I would need, if I ran a VM or 2, I would then need a guest licensing on top of that. The most common way for data centers is the hybrid benefits, right? So this is where I can take my Windows data center with software assurance, and I can convert that. So I get Azure Local for free, I get Kubernetes for free, I get unlimited guests for free, and I don't have to buy any accounts. With all of these, obviously, you get the Azure benefits because it's on an Azure platform. But like I said, we see this Azure hybrid benefits coming up more and more, for data centers, particularly getting off VMware if you already have data center licensing. You just convert that over, stop paying for your data center, for your VMware, and away you go. The last one, which is a relatively new thing, is this one here, which is the perpetual licensing. So everyone probably saw in the news VMware or Broadcom sending everyone cease and desist letters for getting off their perpetual licensing. It's now a violation of the agreement if you ever patch it. Well, we got into perpetual licensing. So you can go to Hewlett Packard, you can actually get a license that runs on that server that you buy from them for as long as you own that hardware, which means that you get Azure Local for the entire time, you get Windows Data Center and unlimited guest rights, you get AKS and all the other benefits we talked about, and you've already sort of prepaid for it, right? So I see this becoming more and more popular every day. So in closing, there's really just a couple of factors, at least driving Azure Local adoption. The first one is the VMware thing. Anyone on VMware is getting off. As far as I can tell, it's pretty much close to 100% of people. Of those people, 50% have VDI of some kind, so either Citrix or Horizon. And lastly, there's we need this sort of AI model on-prem, and this gives you the ability to turn those on if you wanted to run, various AI models on-prem. You're able to do that. And so it's a matter of having this sort of cloud native anywhere. That's what we're really sort of looking for. And so it's a, once again, single pane of glass, and then you can kind of take the customer in whatever direction they want to go. If they just want to run straight IaaS with VMs, great, do that. You want micro-segmentation with your services, do that. You want PaaS services for SQL, do that. Once again, it's really a matter of extending that Azure capability wherever you need it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my buddy Dominic, who's out there somewhere, and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Alan. And let's see here. I am Dominic Santo, Compute Partner Account Manager. I'm helping support DNH. If you guys want to connect with me or send me a message later if you're interested in talking more about ProLiant, my QR code is right here on the screen, and there'll be another opportunity to snap that up in a little bit. But what I want to talk about is why would you consider, of all the platforms to put Azure Local on, why you would choose an HPE ProLiant. So you guys have probably heard of the ProLiant name if you've been selling servers for as long as I have. Sadly, it doesn't look like it, but I have been selling them since they've been compacts. So over 30 years of partnership. As we've been making ProLiant servers, we've been putting Microsoft operating systems on them. So what is the one nice thing, though, especially when you're trying, to integrate complex IT systems together, and you're kind of piecing things together different ways, having that one-stop shop, one place to get that support. Again, that's really going to help you deliver these to your customer and not worry about any of that complexity. An easy reason, right here front and center is going to be number one. We are the number one most secure industry standard server. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about that in a later slide, because it's a really good stat, but I don't really think a lot of people understand exactly why that is, and I'd love to share that information. So again, in next gen's performance, you guys have been watching CPUs and servers and everything for any period of time. There's more and more cores coming out with every generation. Not only is the RAM and PCIe getting better, it allows you to support more efficiently, including with better power supplies, more workloads on less hardware. And depending on where you may fall in the managed services space, if you find customers that are looking to, use IT as a service, you could help deliver that and manage it, as well as HPE GreenLake could help you deliver that to your customer so they can get just what they need, just when they need it, and basically get the same benefits of Azure, the look and feel of Azure on-prem, and then have it as a service model for that as well, for those workloads that need it. Now, again, Why would you choose HPE? One of those reasons, that one throat to choke type of scenario. There's a couple ways of getting Azure Local on HPE. There's integrated systems. This is the appliance way of doing it, okay? This is gonna probably be the easy button, so to speak. And we have a couple of different models, and I'm gonna go over the servers that make it the easiest. But there's also what we call validated nodes. So if your customer has special use cases, you may consider a roll your own type of flavor. We have storage validated nodes that have a whole bunch of storage or super performance around NVMe drives. You can go in that route. We can also use validated nodes for very small edge cases, which we'll kind of talk about later. But the one thing that is the easiest way is simply to go integrated systems. This is the appliance way, and this is what we're going to spend most of the time this afternoon talking about with HPE. Because there's seamless integration with those. They're going to already come pre-installed with the Azure Local, as well as the Azure Kubernetes services already on there. They've already been tested. They ship right from the factory. They can be customized for you. So as partners, hopefully you have been selling ProLiant servers. You're familiar with some of the tools, or your solution architects are familiar with, like OCA, where your customer, or you can go in and build in a server just with the exact specifications your customer needs, so that that's all factory integrated from a hardware specification side. You get the ease of use of the appliance, but you also get the customized just for you. We built it just the way your customer needs. It shows up pre-configured. Again, make it so easy as an appliance, and then just rack and stack it, turn it on, plug in those cables, and start building those clusters for your customer. Definitely makes it way easier now and in the long term. Now, the other nice thing is, because we've been partnered with Microsoft for so long, and we have this integral platform that we're working on together, one of the other easy buttons is the one throat to choke, I think, is the funnest way of saying that. Long story short, you can get the hardware from us. If you run into any issues setting it up or in the operation of the system, you could just call HPE. And we have our engineers that are going to be supporting these products. They can go ahead and basically help you on that particular appliance from cradle to grave. Makes it a whole lot easier than having to transfer calls or find different support numbers. These are really some things. Some other vendors may have this type of stuff. So when it comes down to it, what are the points of differentiation really? And some of my favorite ones are definitely going to be the ILO 6 management chips. And that is something HPE has researched, developed, manufactured, and integrated all by ourselves, okay? Inside that is a silicon root of trust. So I'm going to send a quick little pulse check out to everybody. Can you guys reply, and gals, do you know what the silicon root of trust is? Can you give me a thumbs up if you do, and a thumbs down if you don't? And I'll go ahead and give a couple seconds there. Oh, wait a minute, let me hit start on the pulse check. All right, now you guys should see that on your screen. And again, thumbs up if you've heard it, thumbs down if you haven't. And while you guys are doing that, global supply chain services, which is something that we have security services here. I don't know if that's popped up on the screens. No one's replied yet. Okay, there's one. Sweet. All right. So what we've done with the advent of some of the security vulnerabilities that have come out in the last, say, 5 years or so, we have a special Chippewa Falls configuration center where we build these CTO servers, and basically everyone has the clearances. They've all been background checked. The people that are building and configuring those servers there, all the way through the special logistics operation that we use to get that from the factory to your customer site, say mostly for, say, government or highly secure type of operations, but we do have those options. And since I've been a channel guy ever since, pretty much since I started my computer career in the 90s, the partner ecosystem is something that, you know, a lot of people sell HPE ProLiants. We appreciate you, and you're one of the driving forces that make ProLiant the best platform to deliver it. Okay, so based on the results, we almost got half and half, actually a little bit less. Don't know what silicon root of trust is, so I'm going to go ahead and explain it. So I mentioned earlier that we're the only ones who create our own little mini management computer, ILO6, the baseband management controller that we install on our motherboards. The competition uses an off-the-chip, off-the-shelf version from ASpeed or someone else, which is not bad, but it is a piece that is shared with a lot of other customers. Because of that, the way they check the various firmware and stuff is based on a software hash. So if a hacker can get in and hack a piece of software that you can, install on your server on accident, there is the possibility they could also hack the hash that you would use to verify that it hasn't been monkeyed with, okay? So there are some spots here where, because of that, there are opportunities for things to slip by. There is places at boot up where you could check the firmware and limited amounts of recovering that firmware because it only happens at boot. Secure boot makes sure that when the BIOS says it's okay, it boots safely into the operating system. Now, with the silicon root of trust, what we can do, since HPE builds this all ourselves, is on every individual ILO6, we can burn a hash directly into the hardware. Okay, so this is going to be what the lens, so to speak, that we look at all the downloads and firmwares to be installed on the motherboard to make sure that they haven't been tampered with from when they came, when we originally created the software. So we're going to be able to check our own firmware, because this is a little mini computer that runs separately from the server itself. As long as it's plugged in, then it will be running. It also allows you to turn it on, turn it off, all that type of fun stuff, regardless of whether there's an operating system installed. So it can check and make sure its firmware is good. It can also check the BIOS, as well as all these other little extraneous chips on the motherboard, and even devices on PCIe controllers like network cards and RAID controllers, okay? So if we detect anything has happened there, because this is a separate mini computer and it has its own spot with known good firmware on the motherboard, we can recover from that. If it's an AMD computer, there's additional things that the secure processor can do with our ILO6 chip. But the nice thing, again, since it's a little mini computer, without taking any resources away from the server, it can also check all the time the server's on. Maybe once an hour, once a day, whenever you'd like. It can continue to make sure that the firmware has not been tampered with, because when would you notice that generally? The next time the server reboots. And what would you have been doing? Probably installing drivers, updates, or something like that. If you were to notice that malware at that point, then you have a lot of other things to kind of check through in order to try and fix all of that. But we can set it up where it can automatically recover that firmware, or the more popular one is to quarantine the system itself so that you can kind of study how that may have happened. You kind of go back like CSI and figure out where that malware may have came from. So we developed it, we install it ourselves. This is one thing that HPE can do that none of the other competition can do. They even, one of the guys actually renamed or named their security thing very similar to ours, but ours is based in the actual silicone. It's the hash is burnt in, and that's an immutable security check that others can't do. So that is my opinion, number one reason why that is the reason why we're the most secure industry standard server, and one of the best reasons to plan Azure Local on the HPE platform. Because like when you're building a building, Without a proper foundation, you know you're going to have a shaky building. So we have a couple major platforms to land Azure Local down onto. The two major ones being the DL380. That is, in fact, the most highest selling server ever, and it continues to be, thank goodness for me. And coming up now, the DL145 Generation 11, an AMD box, which has some very interesting adaptations where it allows it to fit in a lot of different areas than you would normally put, say, a DL380. So we'll get into that. So when you think of Azure Local, you think of a big cluster, you're thinking of your data center with all the rows of servers, you know, your main compute hub on-prem for your Azure Local. That's where you would put down the DL380 Generation 11, a full assortment of NVMe and SSD drives, as well as all different types of options for support. It's basically our main workhorse in our server portfolio. But really the most exciting new one, in my opinion, is going to be the DL145. So this is a single CPU box. I think I'm going to maybe have some more specs in one of the other slides. It's all-flash NVMe only. So this is going to support smaller implementations, 1 to 4 nodes. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever turned on a ProLiant server outside of the data center, but typically a DL360, I remember the first time I heard it, I was working in a call center. One of the guys on the tech support team turned one on, and I thought a train was going to come down. Was coming down the hallway there. Yeah, someone has a thumbs up. You guys have heard it. I didn't know that they were really that loud, but you know, I did a lot of pre-sales for 24 years. Definitely know on paper what these servers can do, but haven't heard them quite as much. So what makes this one super cool, this is the perfect server for retail operations, for gas stations, even for manufacturing environments, because it's smaller. It has a lot less noise. I think it's below 35 decibels at 50% CPU load. Has a very much higher vibration, dust, and temperature resilience. So it's you could put it in a lot of different areas. And then if you guys can kind of see here, this front area, this is actually an optional 4-inch dust filter. So if you do need to put one of these clusters down in a manufacturing environment, or even in the back of a gas station, any of those type of places, you know, it can keep all the dirt and yuck from getting into the server. Because of that, a lot of all the cabling is all on the other side, and you can get a security bezel to go on the back as well, to stop all of that, you know, so people can't monkey with it. Now, it does have the ability to be mounted on a desk, on a wall, or in a rack like everyone's used to. So it makes this server quite a bit more versatile than a DL380, and has been extremely popular, not to mention it's using AMD CPUs, so it could have quite a bit of core space inside there, and depending on your Azure licensing method, they could be very, very, you know, you can handle a lot of workloads quite a bit less expensive than running things on VMware. And one of the new ones that's going to be coming out later this year is Azure Local running on a microserver Gen 11. So this is a smaller box. It's small form factor, a little bit bigger than a small form factor desktop itself, and quite a bit thinner as well. This allows you to really bring down the smaller cluster size down to one machine if that particular area or location can handle that type of thing. Maybe fail over into the cloud for this super small site. But when you really need to kind of get the smallest hardware for this particular customer, possibly like, you know, a hub and spoke setup, and you just need, there's only 10 people at this office, the microserver Gen 11 is going to be just good enough for that as well. now. I think Alan touched on this just a little bit, but within our partnership with Microsoft, with Azure Local, we have a special one-time license fee version. This is going to be with the integrated system that allows you to get Azure Local, Data Center, and all those guest OSs, and the Azure Kubernetes service, all for one fee upfront and perpetual, so that once your customer lands this solution down, you guys are good to go for the remainder that they're using that particular Azure service. Let's see. And you guys, has anyone heard of GreenLake? I would imagine probably if you've been selling HPE for the last 5 years or so. It generally works best in a little bit larger type scenario, but you always do run into situations where customers can take advantage of this. It's essentially the ease of use of using the Azure cloud with Azure Local, but on premise. So as Alan was saying, when you do have these particular secure locations or the ability where things have to be on-prem, this is a tool in your tool belt to help your customer afford Azure Local, and kind of upgrading their environment. It's definitely a tool in the tool belt. So if you guys have any questions on this, on whether or not these opportunities may fit, reach out to me. I'll be happy to help connect the resources or answer them directly if possible to figure that out for you guys. Sometimes my little forwards button's not working. There we go. And when it comes to deploying things all over the place, there is a full complement of services that HPE can provide. Being a channel guy, I would much rather you guys sell your services. Don't tell my boss that. But when you have to kind of fill in the blanks, you have a larger solution. You guys have specialties around certain things, but you need some help, or maybe somebody's sick. We're more than happy to help fill in those gaps, all the way from the advisory phase all the way through your sales cycle to operate, automate, and optimize. Again, anytime you guys have any questions around what can be provided through Microsoft or HPE, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to kind of see you guys through there. And no good webinar would be complete without a real win that we had. So healthcare, so this is another situation where having the best security really helps sell value, and it's not the largest, super biggest solution. It was a small shop. They had VMware. They needed to do some refresh. Dell wasn't the best partner in the past. Everyone has their days, right? I'm not, I'm more amazing than everybody in the world. We had the opportunity for multiple sites. We had a cluster with Azure Local. They were able to balance everything out, provide high availability. They had better latency, better customer support, and then with the automation built in, not only from Azure Arc, to be able to provide those patching and that type of stuff, all taken care of without having to click it all yourself. They have a lot more time to focus on, innovating the healthcare and helping their customers. So with that, that is all that I had from an HPE perspective. If you want to go ahead and make sure you have my contact information. And with that, I think I'll hand it right back to Megan.
Great. And then if we could just talk really quickly about our HPE Smart Choice. D&H has this in stock. And if you have any insights on Smart Choice, please.
Oh, yeah. So Smart Choice. So what Smart Choice is there's a lot of smart product managers back inside HPE, and we've been monitoring, what configurations have been shipping from our distributors, average RAM size, options that everybody gets, because what happens, you try to buy some from D&H, and not the RAM you need is not in stock, or you only have one of the two hard drives that your customer wants. All you're trying to do is land something that your customer needs right away. So Smart Choice is going to be a lot of our ProLiant servers for any workload. We prefer Azure Local, but you can put anything on it. It has more than enough RAM, 64, 128 gigs for a lot of workloads. It comes with redundant boot drives, RAID 1 built in, redundant power supplies built in, an extra network card. Typically, you have an additional 10 gig card in there. All the stuff that in 2024, 2025 is table stakes, you can now order one SKU. You'll get the pricing like you had an escalated big deal, right? So anywhere 70% off of everything in one SKU, shipping right in stock right now. So these have been actually very, very popular, and we're proud to share that with D&H and all of our customers, and I'm happy to help anytime I can with this or anything else, HPE.
Thank you, Dominic. And you can find this
You're
information
welcome.
on our website, and you can also contact our HPE team today. It's hpe@dnh.com. And I think we answered all the questions in the chat. So we just want to thank you.
I was going to say, is there any other questions before we go? There was a lot. I do appreciate the interaction.
Yes, for sure. So we want to thank you for joining us today to explore the powerful integration of Microsoft and HPE. And to continue your journey towards a more agile and efficient IT infrastructure, we invite you to request a personalized demo, access our technical resources, and connect with our experts. They've actually been on helping answer with the Q&A. And don't miss out on this opportunity to innovate and stay ahead of the competition. We appreciate this. And for folks that may have joined a little bit late, this is being recorded and it will be on our website. We appreciate all of your time today. And thank you to our presenters.
You're very welcome. Look forward to talking with you soon.
Thanks, everyone.